into some more advanced things that you might want to try when you're working around in Adobe Audition. And we talked a little bit about adjusting volume and using keyframes for that. So I'm going to show you a few more tricks that you might want to try just to change even more things. So you can see, remember, if we go in here to Adobe Audition and make sure we have a multi-track selected, and then go down here, we want to make sure we have enable clip keyframe editing, that check mark next to that, which is great. And so then you can see the keyframes up here where it's kind of moving the volume up or down. But this other line that's underneath there is actually your pan. So if you kind of mouse over it, you'll see a little pop-up thing that says volume or pan. So you can actually keyframe the panning, which is the left or right in a stereo situation, and change that around to where the sound is emphasized. So again, if I just click, again, command click there, I'm going to drop a keyframe. And you can kind of see it there. And then if I do another one here, I can change my pan, you know, from left to right, drop a third keyframe here, maybe go up here, pull this one up, and then maybe add a last one to kind of get me back to the baseline, right? So now, like, what should happen is the volume will stay consistent throughout, but where the sound comes from through the speakers will change. So if you have headphones on, you might be able to hear this, but this will show you generally what it sounds like. So it kind of gives you that like spacey feeling, if that's something that you want to have it do, where sound is moving around behind you. And then it'll come back down to the baseline here. So that's the gist of how you can keyframe sound, like volume and panning, if you want to. And then, you know, another thing to know is, like, if you accidentally add a keyframe someplace or something gets too crazy and it's a problem, you can always go in here and just select the keyframe, so it'll kind of highlight it a little bit more, and then you can hit delete and it'll get rid of that keyframe completely, so that your keyframe is now that one is gone. So if you were at 1,000 accident, you're like, oh nuts, I meant to add more, you can click on it and then, you know, drag that one over there and click another one, and you can really like play around with, you know, what happens on the sort of keyframing, right? So those are the basics of how it all works. You can see that, you know, these little icons tell me the clip is looped, and I am playing around with sort of the panning that's gone on here, right, and the volume. So that's kind of a basic thing. If you want to add or subtract keyframes, remember just to select them and delete them. And then there's also options for changing timing. So let's just say I have another piece of footage I'd like to throw in here. Maybe I want to zoom out a little bit and make it so I can kind of see the whole thing. You know, and again, I can adjust how much or how little of these things I'm seeing. So like if you're really working on a particular track, you might want to like make these tracks a little bit smaller, and then you can expand this one down so you can really see the waveform a little bit better. So this is like some pre-recorded music from a group that I work with, so I can play around with it and use it with their permission. And so, you know, one of the things you'll see is it's a much longer track, and maybe I only want like a little bit of it. Like maybe I just want this kind of bit where there's a little kind of sound from a cello or a bass in the background. So, you know, if I wanted to, I could just click on this this little bit and drag it in and only use that little chunk that I've got in there, which could be fine. And you know, I can delete this part if I need to, and then, you know, this I could still, it's all still there. I can just pull back the parts that I'm actually kind of using, right, the start and stop points of it. The other thing though that I might want to try doing would be to just stretch this or change the timing, right? So if I really wanted to change the timing on this, one way I can do it is just, again, hit the control, right click, go in here to this sort of set of options that you have for each thing that you have selected. So remember, you have to have it selected, then you click on it and you go down here to stretch. And if I go to stretch mode or stretch properties, it's going to bring up this properties kind of dialog box over here, this little palette, right? And so You know, sometimes it'll be twirled up or down depending on what you're looking at, but you know, it'll let you change lots of basic settings like the gain. It'll let you change the name of it. If you want to rename it, you can click here and name that. If you want to remix it, it'll even let you do that. But I'm going to go ahead and just go to the stretch one. And if I click on the mode, I'm going to want to go to like real time, which is just like it's a thing that the computer's going to use to play it back for me, right? And I can choose whether I want it to be, you know, monophonic or polyphonic or any of that kind of stuff. But the main thing we want to play with here is the stretching, right? So if I click this and pull it back to like, you know, 50%, you see how the timeline just got a lot shorter, right? Of that selection that I made. So, and I can go in here and you'll see now that it's playing that music in the background much faster than I wanted to. So I mean, this is kind of silly, but a good rule of thumb is often that if you shorten something, like make it go fast forward through it, it's going to be tend towards comedy, and if you make it longer and more stretched out, it tends towards like tragedy or poetic, right? Which, so it's a good thing to kind of keep in mind. If you make the music sound too fast, it's going to sound distorted and probably a little bit silly, right? So so I'm going to stretch that out. You can see I've stretched it out like to 200 or so %. And now if I push the play head, it'll go through here, and it's going to stretch that whole clip out a little bit. So that might be something that you could find useful as you're playing around with your different clips that you're going to play with, right? So that works a little bit better with this kind of whale sounds and all that kind of thing that I've got going in this one. So I can stretch that, and then I can combine that with panning, keyframing, and volume keyframing, and I can get a lot of really creative, crazy things kind of happen with that. So those are just a few kind of basic things. And then the last thing we're going to play around with, which I always get worried about showing people because you know, you just never know. It can just really absorb you. There's a lot of options in here. Would be to play with the effects. So again, if I just click on one of these and drag it in here, let's see how that sounds. I have this this kind of strange sound here, and again, if I want to solo it, I can, just to hear what just that sounds like, I can hit the S button, and it's kind of these sort of space sounds or ocean sounds, right? And so now I could actually add effects to that in addition to all the other crazy things that I've done. So as long as I have that clip selected, I can click on it. I can go up here to the effects kind of panel that's up at the top, right? And it'll give me lots and lots of options. So let's say I wanted to add something like a little bit of an echo to this, right? So if I click on that, it's going to give me all these options, and I can do it on both right or the left. There's just a ton of things that are like possible, right? So I'm going to just crank some sliders just because I don't really know what they'll do. You'll have to play around to see what happens with yours, and then click close, and then now you can hear there's a lot of pretty wild like echoing and clipping that kind of happens, right? And it puts it in an effects rack deck, which is like these are all different effects that you can add on or off. And so if I click here under the effects rack and click here, okay, now I can really start adding things. So let's say I wanted to add a chorus filter to this. You know, again, like I could crank it up to 5 voices and you know, move some of these sliders around, and then we'll just see what happens when I do that. So now I've got a whole bunch of different kind of effects happening, and I can turn them on or off by just clicking on this little toggle power button, and now I'm only going to hear the chorus effects. If I wanted to add a third one, I could just click here and go down to like reverb. Maybe I really want to go crazy with some full reverb, right? And I could really, you know, play around with that and try a whole bunch of different things, and then, you know, close it, and then let's see what happens. So, and you can see that what's happening now is that my file is clipping over here into these red spots, where when this gets into the red kind of the red territory, it means that I've got the volume up too loud, and it's going to create distortion. It's like it's clipping out of the audible range, right, for your equipment that you might have. So you want to watch out for that. If you see that clipping happening, especially when you start adding effects, you're going to want to like make some adjustments so it doesn't pop or kind of like distort your speakers as you listen to it. So you probably had that experience in the past. So the easiest thing to do would just be to crank my volume down a little bit so it's not quite as loud on that clip, and see if that helps keep it from doing that. I can also keyframe the audio or whatever, right? So I can add as many effects as I can kind of fit in here, and this will all take RAM and memory away from, like, out of your computer. So the more crazy things you do, the harder it might be for your computer to keep up with audio, with playing the representation of your audio for you. So just something to know if you have an older computer that's a little slow, that might be a little bit one of those challenging things that might be difficult for you. So that's the basics of again, like how to adjust adding more keyframes for panning, and adding and removing keyframes, how to adjust time for stretching or extending or shrinking your fast forwarding or slowing down, if you will, and then adding effects. So you're going to have to play around to see what happens for your project, but that gives you the gist of what you'll need to do to make a basic project kind of happen.